quite a number of protests across the country, and there were people who were said to have been killed. You'll remember also the 2 children who died, one here in Nairobi and the other one in Kisumu. So there has been really a big conversation about police brutality. I just want to bring in my guest. He's joining us from our City Center studio. He's known as Abdullahi Halahe, who is a researcher with Amnesty International. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this morning. So I just want to hear your thoughts really about your general overview about this particular report. At what point was it conducted? When did you start the investigations? I understand that you interviewed 151 victims. You also interviewed people from the civil society. How long has this investigation and this report been compiled?
Thank you so much, Betty, for inviting me. I think I should just take you back a little bit. I mean, even before we had the election, we had our internal planning, and we felt, considering the history of the police in this country and, pre-election warnings that the police were giving, where they've even acquired some of these sophisticated crowd control mechanism, we thought certain areas are going to be in problems. And so this was done, we preemptively planned for this, but the study period was between the 9th and the 12th of the month of August.
All right, so you said that you interviewed 151 people. Maybe you could just take us through exactly who are these people, how open were they? Because, I mean, there's a time maybe about 3 weeks or so ago when we were speaking to the CS, the acting CS for Interior, Fred Matiang'i, who said that, still they're conducting investigations, same as the IG Boynet, who said also they were conducting investigations. So how come you were able to reach 151 people who were able to give you this kind of information of what exactly happened in different parts of the country?
Thank you so much. I mean, there are a few variables that are at play here between what we do and what probably the police does. I mean, ours is pure human rights reporting, and theirs is, investigation potentially that could lead to criminal investigation. And of course, the thresholds are different. And I'm not in any way suggesting that because of that, they should be where they are right now compared to ourselves. But the thing that we also need to remember is the relations between the police and the community in some of these low-income areas is not necessarily a great relation. Trust deficit because of structural historical problems of how the police have dealt with people in some of these areas. But that is not in any way excusing the failure up to date to, for the police to conduct their work. In some of our recommendations, we are saying people who have allegedly been involved in this need to be taken out of service so that they don't interfere with the investigation.
All right.
Probably just to go back a little bit,
yes.
There is nothing, sorry. Probably to go back a little bit in 0708 as well. I mean, Waki Commission was able to do some of the investigations around police violence, whereas the police have not done anything. So what we are calling such an environment is proper investigation and people who are involved for accountability to be done. I remember interviewing Lebo's mother, Silas's mother, who you played her clip. This is a 17-year-old student at Barding High School in Ugenya. They came to his place when he was studying. He would be doing his KCSE this year. So they just took him out of his house, they bet him, and he had spinal problems and he passed on at Kenyatta Hospital. So I think we need to be very strong with the police that they need to be doing investigations that lead to accountability for people who are involved. We cannot, every electoral cycle lose people. We cannot every, demonstration in this country, we lose people's lives. And the best that we can offer is we are still investigating.
Yes, exactly. And, you've just mentioned one of the many cases that we've covered here on KTN News. You will remember baby Pendo, the 6-month-old baby who was clobbered to death. And you'll also remember that the IG and the CS for Interior have been on record saying that, the people who lost their lives because of, police, coming and clamping down on them was a result of them being criminals. Actually, they have not accepted that any of the people who who died are as a result of police brutality, but they're saying that, you know, all these people who've died is because, you know, they were criminals in one way or another, and they never really come out clearly. What is your stance as Amnesty International with regard to how the government institutions and individuals have come out to say that, you know, these people died as a result of criminal activities?
Thank you. I think I cannot speak for the police, but I think there are standards, rules, and procedures in this country that, you know, the police need to follow, including the CS. You remember very well, immediately after the protest on the 9th, the CS came out and said nothing happened.
Yes.
A few days later, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights came up with a report that indicated that over 20 people were killed. And it didn't take that long. I think what you're seeing in that circumstance is impunity from, you know, the leadership. I mean, these things could only occur because of, you know, one or two things. Unless the leadership is not condoning. If they are not condoning, then we need to see action in terms of people who are involved. And like I said, all these are happening within a rich, you know, history of the police's violation of human rights. A few months ago, if you remember very well, the teenagers who were killed, you know, in broad daylight in Misli.
Right.
And the arguments that we were given at that time was they were criminals. And so you are either a terrorist or you are a criminal. And I think the pattern that we need to be very careful and need to expose here is, you know, young people of certain age living in a specific socio-economic environment, particularly in Dandora, Kibera, Kariobangi, Mathare, these places where, you know, you're killed because the police feel that they can get away with. And I think that needs to stop.
All right. There's something from the report, and I'll just read it because I feel like it's a very strong statement from this particular report. And in part it says, and I'll read this and I quote, "This deadly use of excessive force has become the hallmark of police operations in Kenya and must be decisively stopped before the next election takes place." That's Michelle Kagari, who's a deputy regional director for East Africa. This is really a strong statement saying that, you know, this has become the norm with police operations. And even just going back to the anti-IEBC protests, we've had quite a number of people, you know, dying as a result of, you know, police brutality. Maybe you can just delve deeper into exactly what this statement is all about. What do you mean that it has become the hallmark of police operations?
Thank you so much, Betty. I think you'll agree with me that in this country, apart from 2002, since the introduction of multi-party politics, all elections have either been preceded by violence or you know, followed by violence. And in most cases, and I think one of the most illustrative report that that makes this very clear is the Waki report, where, you know, close to 30% of people who were killed by the police. So after 07, all the violence, I mean, like, you can have the case of Pendo, you can have the case of teenagers who were killed in Isli, you can have the case of Silas. So what we are saying is that this seems to be an emerging or recurring patterns wherever there are elements of violence and the police response using disproportionate and unnecessary force. I want to clear something here that a lot of the time people get confused. The National Police Service Act is very, very clear in the use of force. The standards are very narrowly defined simply because, you know, freedom of assembly is one of the fundamental freedoms.
Right.
So when police gets out of that narrowly defined rules of engagement in the use of force, people tend to lose their lives. And if these patterns keep on recurring every other time, then we are left with no option but to say that this is the hallmark of the police operation. I I just want to take you back a little bit before, 0708, the kind of legislative framework within which the police was operating. For instance, in this particular instance, after, National Police Service Act was passed, new constitution was promulgated, there were very clear rules of engagement. So what we are seeing is a police that needs to be a service, but unfortunately stuck in the mind frame of still being a force.
All right, so that's a bigger conversation that has been, taking place in the country about the police being more of a service than a force. But also, what are some of the recommendations that your report has? And, the thing is, we've seen quite a number of reports, since the August 8th election. We've seen quite a number of civil society groups come out and say, this is our assessment of how things have been, were before the election, during the election, after the election. But really, these recommendations, they don't even get to see the light of day. They never get to be discussed anywhere. So what really are you hoping to do with the recommendations that you have? And what are some of the strongest recommendations that this report holds?
Thank you, Betty. In terms of our recommendations, I think ultimately what everybody is interested in is, accountability of people who are involved. We cannot just sit here every time we lose lives and the best explanation that we get is these issues are being investigated.
Right.
So one of our recommendations is, for police officers who are involved or allegedly involved to step aside and for the police to conduct investigation, and people, if they are found culpable, they should face the law. And the second one is for police to begin cooperating with IPOA. Because IPOA is the civilian policing oversight that, that does investigation. So a lot of the time to date, what we see is the lack of cooperation of the police with the IPOA. So what that tells you is that the police do not want to be held accountable. Secondly, and this is going to be very important for us, is establishment of a commission of inquiry into this. I mean, if you follow very keenly these criminal activities that people are being accused of, either terrorists or thugs in informal settlement areas, is something that has gone on for a very long time, and the numbers that we have are staggering. And I'm with you when you say that various reports have come out,
yes,
and the recommendations more or less look and feel the same. It's because nothing is moving from people who are involved in this. So our best option is that for the police and the general public, and including the media, that our challenge for us to continue staying on this story, because these are stories of people losing their lives. Their children, their teenagers who are supposed to be doing their Kenya National Examination Council that is no longer here. Mama, the Mama Silas said, why didn't they kill me? Because that would have been easier, because my son, I had a lot of hope in him. The teacher said,
yes,
he was going to be a doctor. So for how long as a country can we tolerate this? And people who are involved need to be, for action to be taken against them. And I will urge even the media to continue staying on this story and see how far we can go. But to the police, to the parliament, and also to the general public and people who are funding the police, particularly the international community, they need to come in very strongly and see if, the funding that they are giving are in part, responsible for people losing their lives.
All right. Thank you very much, Abdullahi Halake. He is a researcher with Amnesty International. And this morning, they released a report that was just generally talking about police brutality, saying that about 33 people have lost their lives since the August 8th elections as a result of police brutality. It's a very big conversation here in the country. And, of course, we'll continue to keep an eye on it here on KTN News. But before